Hey and welcome to Neverwinter with Aragon. In this video I'd like to go over the best enchantments for a DPS with all these new combat changes. Which enchantment should you be using to obtain your most potential to get the maximum amount of damage? Well, first things first, you want to be running the highest rank enchantments that you can possibly obtain. So that would be rank 15 on normal enchantments, that would be a rank 14 armor enchantment, and that would be a rank 14 weapon enchantment. I will include Runestones as a type of enchantment, and you'll also want those at rank 15. Now, when an enchantment is at its max rank, those being rank 15s, it will have 200 item level, and at 200 item level, this will contribute to your total item level, which will then directly contribute to your base damage here, meaning you will deal more damage. And for Runestones rank 15, they will also have 200 item level at their max. Then with your armor enchantment, that will be 800, so it's more important to get a higher rank armor enchantment than just all your normal incy wincy little enchantments, because the armor enchantment will give a whole lot more item level along with your weapon enchantment at a total of 800 compared to only 200 worth on those standard rank 15 enchantments. So for a DPS, yes, the best enchantments are the assassin enchantments in your offense slots. They will give you bonus to critical strike, accuracy and combat advantage, all three of these stats of which you really need as a DPS to maximize your damage. As a DPS, it's very easy to cap out this power due to Forte, and therefore you won't necessarily need extra power in your enchantments, and thus assassins make a very good choice. You can always slot in one or two darks if you need be to give you that extra crit severity. But all around, you generally want to be running with assassin enchantments within all of your offense slots. However, of course, this is not a must. You can, by all means, run with a single stat enchantment. The reason behind it is a triple enchantment will give you less combined rating and more of the actual stats you need. Combined rating will literally just divide up the stats that the enchantment gives you amongst all of these 15, and many of them you don't actually need as a DPS to maximize your damage. And that is why assassin enchantments are one of the best for DPS characters in their offense slots. However, one thing is a must. As a DPS character, you really want to be having a Tenebrous, at least one of them. Any more doesn't really give much more of an impact. This Tenebrous enchantment will have the chance that you will deal a certain amount more damage based on how many hit points you have. Usually nowadays it's very easy to have the maximum amount of hit points that you need to deal the maximum amount of damage with this. And I highly recommend slotting one of them in one of your offense slots. Sure, it won't give you those stats, making your character look more powerful, but overall, it will give you more damage. Now, in our utility slots, you ideally want dark enchantments. Dark enchantments will give you this Forte, and this Forte will give you, depending on your Paragon, extra power percentage, so that will be in your other contributions, helping you get to this 90%. And along with that, if you're, let's say, a rogue assassin, you will get extra combat advantage, and then you just have some random defense stat, which doesn't really matter as a DPS, because we're here just to do damage. So finally, we move to our defense slots. I highly recommend single stat enchantment and radiant enchantments. Radiant enchantments will give you more maximum hit points. The more hit points you have, the more survivable you will be, and the less likely some mob will just come along and one-shot you. However, of course, you can run with other enchantments. It's not overly necessary you run with Radiance, but instead of Radiance I would recommend perhaps running with Awareness, those tactical enchantments, or you could just run with Azures to give you this defense. But I recommend Radiance. Those are pretty nice and cheap nowadays anyway. Now we move to our armor enchantment. There are multiple different armor enchantments and multiple different ones for different situations. I highly recommend running a Shadowclad enchantment, this one just here, which will add up that stacks of deflection and defense whenever you get hit, and whenever you deflect, these stacks will go away, and if you manage to get up to 8 stacks of these, you will go invisible for 2 seconds, meaning you will lose all aggro, and you will also daze people around you, which is a very nice buff, especially in PvP. But you would only run this enchantment when you're against lots of enemies and you may get hit often, because it can be very hard for the tank to hold aggro on everybody. Now if you're running a trial scenario where you get hit very infrequently, like Tower of the Man Mage or Zariel, where you only get hit indirectly, not by the boss themselves, unless of course the tank loses aggro, but that should never happen. That is why you want to be running a Bark Shield, for those mechanics which you cannot avoid and you just need that extra buff in survivability. It essentially gives you another 50,000 hit points. So when you have these Bark Shield stacks, you'll block for an extra 50,000, and this will stack on top of, let's say, the Paladin Shield. So this all round considered is very good for those big hits which you just want to be able to survive to make sure that they don't one-shot you. Last thing to mention is the Negation Enchantment did recently get a big buff, and it is now a contender instead of the Shadowclad Enchantment. You could very well run the Negation Enchantment when you're in a big group of mobs rather than the Shadowclad. However, it won't give you the advantage of giving you extra deflect or giving the effect that you'll go invisible. Negation is very good now, and it will give you that extra survivability. If you're, let's say, tanking as a DPS, I would definitely run a Negation. But if you have a tank in the party and you're just taking the off hits now and again, Shadowclad is overall a bit better. So finally we move to the Weapon Enchantment. There are multiple different ones you should be using. As a Cleric DPS, the Arbiter, I do recommend running the Vorpal Enchantment just to buff up your stats and making those big hits hit bigger. Now the Cleric Arbiter is the only real unique DPS in that part where they only really have big hits, and their at-wills are literally only there to create those hits to be bigger on those encounters. So that's when you would run a Vorpal Enchantment. Anything else isn't really great. Now for everybody else, you don't really want to be running a Vorpal whatsoever. You want to be running either a Lightning Enchantment. A Lightning Enchantment is ideal for an AoE scenario where you have lots of enemies. It gives you a chance whenever you hit your enemies that you will basically shoot off an arc of lightning that will do 60 magnitude extra damage, and this can chain up to 3 times, meaning you can gain a whole lot more damage depending on how often you hit. This is great with the Rogue's Duelist Flurry, for example, where you hit very quickly over a short period of time, meaning you can get many of these lightning bolts to shoot off and hit multiple enemies. However, when you're in a boss fight, you definitely want to be running with the Bilethorn Enchantment. That is if the boss fight lasts longer than a few seconds. The Bilethorn Enchantment has the advantage that you will do 60 extra magnitude damage after 4 seconds, and this will stack up 3 times, meaning every second you can gain this. As long as you're attacking every second, you will gain this stack that will proc every second for 60 extra magnitude damage. This is a pretty crazy buff to dealing your damage over time. It's like a bleed effect on the boss, and nearly every DPS benefits from this hugely. Only class I would say that doesn't really do so would be the Cleric, as they don't hit that often with their at-wills. Last thing to mention is our Runestones. Which ones should you be using? Well, as a DPS, you just want to focus on those 5 different offense stats, and thus you want to make sure you have those ratings capped out or as high as you can possibly get them, and thus you want to be using Runestones which will give you those stats. For example, you may want to run Arcane Runestones for critical severity, you may want to run Recondite Runestones for accuracy, or even your Enigmatic Runestones for combat advantage, and there are a few more like the Profane one for your critical strike, or even your Empowered for power. None of these are particularly going to make a huge difference, but as a DPS what you mainly want to focus on is capping out this power first, then this combat advantage, then this accuracy, and focusing on critical strike and critical severity last. And therefore that is what you would prioritize in that order, and therefore you would get those companion pieces of equipment and the runestones to go with them to get those ratings as high as possible. So that's that, short and sweet. Hopefully this was somewhat clear and helpful for you guys on what to buy with all these new combat changes. Now, these things are not a must. If you have alternatives, you can probably very well run with them. This is just for min-maxing endgame. I wouldn't bother investing something huge into, let's say you have a Vorpal now, and I'm saying you should get a Lightning. Just run with the Vorpal until you're in endgame and you really want to be that end game competitive state where you want to be the top DPS all the time, then yes, you might want to get a lightning in an AoE when you're running those dungeons and killing those mobs, and you might want to get a Bilethorn for a single target. So that being said, hopefully I presented this well. If I did, consider leaving the video a like, and if you're new around here, consider subscribing. I will see you guys around. Goodbye for now.